So our next presentation, we value, as always, our partnership with WSDOT, and going through the audience too today, I definitely want to recognize Brian Nielsen, Chris Keifenheim, and Brian White as their regional administrators for WSDOT. But we're also excited to have Todd Trepanier here today to give us his presentation on basically the state of the system, the highway system in our state. So take it away, Todd.
Thanks, Billy. Boy, that was some rich, amazing conversation. And I know this is going long into lunch, but I'm hoping that you can all hang on and stay in here. I'm thinking that what I'm going to share here is going to enhance and maybe even add some more depth of understanding on what you all were privileged to hear so far. And thank you, Billy, for such a outstanding, rich agenda. I knew when I looked at it, it was going to be an amazing morning, and it has been. Many of you know me, but there could be a few out there that do not. So I'll just do a quick introduction here. As Billy said, my name is Todd Trepanier. I'm currently the Assistant Secretary of the Regions for the state. Just a little bit of background, by the way, again, maybe just to give me an inch of credibility. I've been with the department for many, many years. Brian Ziegler, right before the meeting, was just tell me he found a photograph of me back in 2001, and then I would laugh if I seen how young that I looked. So I've been here quite a while. I've spent a number of years being the administrator of the Laskway Viaduct Replacement Program. I don't know if you remember that, but it built the tunnel in Seattle. I moved on then to be the regional administrator in what's known as the South Central region that's based out of Yakima. After doing that for a number of years, because basically of my grandchildren's proximity to Spokane, I lateraled over to be the regional administrator of the Eastern region based out of Spokane, and was there just not quite a year when this opportunity to step up and be an assistant secretary of all the regions and the agency's principal engineer came up, and they gave me that opportunity. So here I am. So I am going, again, this is going to be interesting to see how what I'm going to share this morning from a WSDOT perspective dovetails in, works with, or enriches the conversation you've already heard. But I'm not an IT guy. So now I'm always freaking out to see if I can actually share my screen.
Here you go.
Okay, so looking good, Billy? Noel?
Yep.
Okay, let's get into it here. Okay, WSDOT. I want to spend a couple moments on what is known as our strategic plan, and there's great relevance in this. Don't yawn now and say, I'm going to go grab my lunch because it's a strategic plan presentation. It's not, but there's a few things that are very, very important on this strategic plan. For WSDOT, a strategic plan means let's focus on the things that we're not normally already doing. So these are activities that are not what we would just naturally have happen because of the way the system is set up. And so you see these goals that were listed, and there's preliminarily a whole host of rich reading here on strategies that are ideas, kind of brainstorms on how you can go about fulfilling these goals. One of the reasons that I wanted to point this out, can you see my cursor move as well, Billy?
Yep.
Just so under resilience, take a look at this strategy right here. This might sound kind of familiar to you. Asset management. Build resilience and reduce vulnerabilities while proactively managing the preservation and maintenance of WSDOT's assets necessary to achieve and sustain a state of good repair. So it's right in here in our strategic plan, all of what you've been talking about and why many of you spent time being a part of Good Roads. Okay, and I'm going to drop back and speak for a moment. You've heard about this well by Billy, but I want to touch on it even some more. There's values that encircle these, and these values are very important. And you see I pulled out here to the side the value of safety. And this is a big deal. And again, you heard about it a little bit earlier about the Workers' Memorial that took place just last week. And I was able to be there. And again, this was quite a powerful event. And again, you heard quickly about, you see the picture there. There are the 6 individuals that were in that work zone that was spoken about. These are the individuals that, again, to set the stage, there was a problem on the pavement that was there because of lack of preservation funding. This was so dramatic, it was blowing out people's tires. What is WSDOT supposed to do? Do they go out there, put themselves in a risky situation? Many would say that's their job. Do they wait for a daylight, a better time to do the work? How do they do this? Well, there are cars that are being pulled over, they're blowing out tires. They choose to make this decision in with conjunction with the State Patrol. They're pulling onto the shoulder to wait for the State Patrol to do a rolling slowdown so they can put out the lane closure. And within 90 seconds, they were hit from behind. And all those individuals that you see on the stage in the orange vest went to the hospital. And if you get the opportunity, like I did, to speak to these individuals, it will even drive home more the importance and the relevance of that safety being one of our values and the things that we are doing to deal with safety. These are maintenance and operation workers that are out on the highway. Much of the work that we've been doing and the attention that we've been putting on to safety have been in construction work zones as well. And you also heard this number earlier, but I'm going to show you the graph so you can put it in perspective. I've just spoken about the safety of workers in capital program work zones and maintenance and operation workers that are out on the highway. And now this chart is just talking about traffic deaths in general. It is now over 818. And look at the slope of that line. Back in 2018, and again, I was around in 2018, if you would have told any one of us in this industry that we were going to jump not a little bit above this mid 500 numbers, but at this slope line this fast, no one would have believed it. But here we are. So the issue of dealing with safety, the issue of needing to talk about a safe systems approach, and guess what? Everything I'm going to talk about here today, you're going to see not only is important, but it ties to the need for revenue, dollars, and selection as a priority. So I really want you to just kind of stop and think about those numbers, because you hear them and you see them. You hear the stories. Here's another small story, and this was mentioned earlier. I believe it was Monday. I'm sitting here just my regular day work. My phone chimes, it pops up. I've got a social media message. It's a social media message from WSDOT, and it's telling the story that social media was about ready to post about 3 work zone accidents that had occurred on the I-5 corridor that day, that morning. And the social media individual, before they could post that, they were getting ready to hit post, they got the information of a 4th. So within a span of basically one few hour time frame, there were 4 work zones that were entered by vehicles on the I-5 corridor between Everett and Vancouver. Think about this. This is just out of control. Basically, everything that we're doing is demonstrating we're in unprecedented times. The difficulty of what this work was like when I started 4 decades ago, or when Brian Ziegler was a young man, it is beyond, almost beyond our comprehension of where we're at right now. I'm sure Dave Gent could share stories about paving contracts. Brian White is on here. He's familiar with the paving contract where a flagger was lost. Not that many. It is out of control, unprecedented times. We see this chart so many times, you probably all are kind of numb to it and kind of sick of it. I'm pivoting here quickly away from safety, because guess what? We just have this coming at us from every direction. You're all very much familiar, I think, with the $1.51 billion deficit in the bottom corner of that chart. And you're very familiar, if you're highway centric and you're thinking of the 1 billion shortfall that's on the top right of that chart. It is a crazy amount of need. And we talk about this, and we talk about this, and we talk about the need for preservation. and we talk about these numbers. And you've seen an update, and you just heard from 3 of the 4 corners, which was amazing to have them here. And this was highlighted from Mr. Gent earlier as well. Some of what they were able to do in this last legislative session. So they were able to put 150 million into fish passage, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. They were able to put 100 million into preservation for this biennium, and 80 million. This slide is it's not for the next 3 bienniums, it's 3 bienniums total. So it's 100 this biennium and 80 in the following 2. They were able to backfill that Portage Bay project. Again, you heard differing opinions on that, but they were able to come to that unanimous decision. They were able to decide that the SR18 project needed to be considered a phased project and move forward with phase 1. And they also considered delaying some projects so they could move forward with some other projects. So they did a lot of legislative work. While that's all going on, meanwhile, in the backdrop, what you're all dealing with and we're dealing with is here's just a quick rundown of emergency work that has come up in this biennium alone. So these are contracts that were not planned. This is work that we didn't want to have to do, but we had to do because something failed and it became an emergency. Sometimes emergencies are because of weather events. But guess what these emergencies are coming more often from? They're coming because of the lack of preservation dollars. Couple examples of these. Here is an emergency contract. You see this tagline, culvert failure. You think, yeah, okay, so they got a culvert failure on the interstate. This picture was supplied to me from South Central Region, and I love it because it shows the magnitude of what just a little sweet culvert failure can cause. This is, I guess if you're on the I-5 corridor, maybe the I-82 corridor in Central Washington, doesn't mean that much to your daily life, but it does mean a lot to a lot of people. Look at this. This is major interstate having to deal with emergency repair. Could you be more dramatic on having to close a complete roadway to deal with a problem because of preservation shortfall? They were not able to take care of this in a day or 2. This was a major disruption and a major unknown cost. And going back to these costs, you know where that 28 million comes from? It's not like we have this account. Well, if you have a highway emergency, you can get the money. This comes from the preservation dollars that we would normally be programming for the type of preservation work that Dave Gent was talking about earlier today. That's where it comes from. So when you got to spend money on an emergency, that means there's a preservation program project that you have to not move forward on. Okay, so here's an emergency project that's impacted what I'm going to call the capital program. Here's another emergency project. This was a bridge, SR25, Northport. I think you've heard me speak about this before. This bridge, with an inspection, found out because it does not have routine preservation type of projects that are occurring to it, that it had an erosion issue that had taken place that was going to result in the closure of this bridge if something was not done. It was decided that the capital program simply could not afford to work in this area. So this was repaired by maintenance and operation forces. Those type of individuals that you've seen earlier standing on that stage that were hit in that work zone, they're the ones that kept this open. And they didn't keep it open using preservation dollars. They kept it open by using maintenance and operation dollars. So several times today, I should have been actually counting. You've heard the phrase repeatedly, maintenance and preservation. Well, I'm here to tweak your mindset. It is not maintenance and preservation. There is no such thing. And us using this terminology has been great when you're trying to make a presentation and your time has been used up and you're trying to speak fast, to lump 2 things into one sentence, but it has caused a problem in understanding. And again, it is not maintenance and preservation. It is maintenance and operations. And then there's another program called preservation. So let's look at these and understand them. So what is maintenance? This is basically keeping something in good condition. Maintenance, the M program. You've seen these stats and you all appreciate them or you wouldn't be on this call with me. 20,000 lane miles, 3,000 bridges, 47 rest areas. A very modest budget in terms of the budget size, a little over 600 million. 600 million funding approximately 1,500 employees. Oh, by the way, they operate the 500 snowplows that keep your roads open in the winter. That's called operational cost. That is maintenance and operations. That is not preservation. Maintenance work and the M and O. What is the difference, Trepanier? Okay, maintenance. This is out there, pavement patching. This is cleaning out those ditches and culverts. And oh, by the way, for those of you that are geeky in this, you know this. Those of you that are not geeky don't know this. If we don't use our M dollars to clean out our ditches and culverts correctly, if there is a weather event, a natural disaster, the federal government will not reimburse us if we had not did our appropriate maintenance work on those features. So when we can't fund ditches and culverts, we're putting ourselves at risk of not being able to receive federal dollars if we were to have a weather disaster. Vegetation control. You see all those weeds out there? Some of those are required to be controlled by law. Some of them are not, but I can guarantee you our phones ring off the hook and our emails have nasty words in them when we don't control them. Paint stripes. Does anyone think it's important to be able to see where the lanes are? This is M. This is maintenance. This is not preservation. Operations. Does anyone enjoy stopping at a rest area? If you don't personally enjoy stopping at a rest area, at least please pull into one and see how many people do use them. They are a never-ending stream of individuals. Snow and ice again. Our whole state, when it comes to the winter months, one of the reasons our economy keeps going is because of the very solid attention that we give to our obligation, our operational obligation of snow and ice. Those disasters that I talked about, the first people that respond to them is the M and O funding, not the P funding. These maintenance forces, these 1,500 people, these 500 snowplows, taking care of these 20,000 lane miles, they're spread across the entire state. They have facilities, and oh, by the way, if you haven't had the opportunity to go look at all these facilities, you will find most of them where you will want to write a thank you letter for our employees to be willing to work out of such a poor state of shape facility. But they're out there and they're working every day to keep this system operational and to operate it. They put a lot of time into this effort. Here's a list of the work type of activities that they do in priority order, with the bar graph showing you how much of their budget is basically allocated to that specific activity. Look at that operational activity number 4. I've already talked about it several times. Snow and ice. Look how much of the money stream it is. It is an operational cost. And when we talk about the shortfall of maintenance and preservation money, and people's minds only think about preservation, we are shorting the conversation about the need for that ribbon right there. Again, I'm going to harp on this because I really want some more understanding about this. When we're in the maintenance and operations world, we talk about their work in the terms of group activities. And this is the way that they're broke up. So you can see the roadway maintenance and operations, pavement patching, shoulder maintenance. Guess where that all takes a hit and needs more money? Well, when that preservation money isn't happening, there's all those drainage items. Group 2, if those aren't being taken care of, guess what? I just told you about that. You could be in jeopardy of not only losing your assets because they won't be able to deal with a flood or a rainstorm, but you won't be eligible for federal reimbursement. Group 3, this is where everyone wants to cut money. I guarantee you, when you try and cut money from Group 3, you're in violation of county ordinances on noxious weeds and all the others. You get everyone that you can think of calling you and telling you better go out there and fix those things. So I can go on and on. Group 6, Do you need guideposts when it's foggy out? Do you like to see striped lines? Do you know how many calls Brian White, and before Brian White, Todd Trepanier, and before Todd Trepanier, Don Whitehouse, and before Don Whitehouse, Leonard Pittman, how many calls all these RAs receive about there not being appropriate lane markings on I-90? It is a 1 over Snoqualmie Pass. It's a 100 expectation. Rest areas. If you even attempt to dabble in cutting rest area operations, and Brian Ziegler's probably been around long enough where he can remember where we thought that was a good idea at one point in time, and we learned differently very quickly. Here's how those activities line up by how much of the budget that they take. This is a chart now that kind of shows this group, this maintenance operation groups has a way to grade themselves. And this is the chart that indicates that more and more of their grades are slipping into failure as these years have rolled by because they've simply lost their funding. This is a great slide. So if you haven't been paying attention today, please look at this slide. I'm going to attempt to explain this. Look at the bar at the very top, kind of that beige color. There is a maintenance and operation budget totaling a little over $580 million. They roll into the 23-25 biennium. They get a huge increase. They go from 580 to 610. Maintenance operations, what are you complaining about? It's raining money on you. Is it? That first gray bar that says compensation, there was wage increases that we had to give employees. It's appropriate to give employees. It's it's called cost of living. Those increase the budget need. Just to pay for those increased wages that you had to have, you slightly went below what the legislature gave us. So you actually moved backwards. It looks like they gave a bunch of money, but it wasn't even enough money. And I'm not blaming the legislature. You've heard from the three corners, 3 of the 4, and you've heard they only have so much revenue. They got to decide where to put it. There's not the revenue to put in there at this point in time to even correctly fund those wage increases. So what that means is something else got cut. Fuel and utilities. These are cost increases that no one can do anything about. So those cost increases between the biennium of 21-23 and 23-25, now that even chipped more in. So again, now the money that was given, it was not an increase. You're now behind by how much that gray bar is over the red line. So now that was just fuel and utilities. Those are costs that you have to do no matter what you're doing. You can't just decide not to pay your electric bill or not to put fuel in your snowplow. But we have materials costs. You have to buy that spray for that vegetation control. You have to buy that asphalt to fix that pothole. All those materials that we use have been inflated in cost. So that's added this much more cost, which was not in there. So it's basically cutting what you can work on. And this final kicker, and believe there's more, we just chose to put 4 on this graph, is third-party damage. This means when a motorist hits and breaks one of our features. This can be a luminaire standard. This can be a guardrail. This could be, sometimes this is a cantilever signpost that costs $50,000. We attempt to recover that money from the insurance companies, but whether we recover that money, if we recover the money, it doesn't come back into M. It goes back to the legislature to decide what to do with it. If we don't recover it, it also comes out of M. That's this much more. So basically, in summary, when it appeared that the legislature was able to greatly assist maintenance and operations by increasing their funds by this amount in the 23-25 biennium. In fact, in that biennium, they went in the hole $38 million. Hopefully you're understanding what this slide just showed. So the crisis that we have is also very much in maintenance and operations, not to be confused with preservation. This is the chart I think you've all seen many times about the money, and I just want to talk about this at the bottom. This solid green is the maintenance money. just again demonstrate over many, many years, they have not received the type of increases that, even though we've seen these volumes of money come to these other programs, including preservation, maintenance and operations has not received that same of increase. Why is that, Trepanier? I mean, you're making a compelling story here. Why is it going on? Isn't maintenance and operations currently in the red? You just showed me a bar chart of $38 million. They must be in the red. Tell me how much they're in the red. Guess what? I can't tell you, because they're not allowed to be in the red. They can't be in the red. So when they go in the red, they have to return themselves to the black by cutting their services. And they cut their services. Their services are all already so underdone out there that no one in the public even recognizes the reduction. So to make an understanding how much maintenance and operation is in need of funding becomes next to impossible, because you can't show a red number, because you can't be in the red at the end of the biennium and maintenance and operations. You got to cut services to get back in the black. And that reduction in services jumps on top of so many existing reductions in services, it doesn't even get noticed. Another part that's problematic about this whole thing is many of the ways that you've all talked about this and thought about it, which is great, is on the capital side of the house, what we expend when we go out with the preservation program. Maintenance and operations does their money a different way. They take their money and they have to think about it in 4 things: labor, equipment, material, and others. This is called LEMO. And again, I know I might get down in the weeds here a little bit, but this is important. So when you look at this money, they have to pay other, because that's utility bills. That is, they cannot cut from other. They have to pay for their equipment. We have a system that is set up that whatever we spend on equipment, we reimburse ourselves by charging ourselves. So that is a locked amount. So the only place that you can take the money from is those materials and from labor. That's the only 2 pieces of this pie that you can take the money from. If you take it from materials, then you've got labor that doesn't have any materials to work with. If you take it from labor, you do not have an adequate workforce to do the functions, which is where we are at. We have a labor force size that is too small to do the services out there that we expect from maintenance and operations. Okay, let's pivot now to this other thing called preservation. So now preservation is the act of restoring something to normal. Preservation, provide long-lasting work. But guess what? I've got it in red there. How you're doing preservation has a direct effect on your maintenance and operations budget. And I've got it in black and underlined at the bottom. Right now, as I showed earlier with the amount of emergency contracts, not only do I not have the labor to do the maintenance and operation tasks that are expected of us, what I do have are getting diverted to become emergency responders to preservation emergencies that are taking place on the system. They're becoming responders because of the lack of money in preservation. Okay, so now I'm going to drill in a little bit in this preservation, because we've talked about a lot this morning, but I want you to understand a little bit of detail about it. I'm assuming that everyone on this call wants to be an advocate for getting this story understood. We talked a lot about that earlier. We talked to Mike Lindblom. Do people understand? Do people understand? Why don't they understand? So preservation is part of the capital program. And now look at this. In 1992, there was a change in the way the capital program worked. We were asked by the legislature to come up with a new programming structure for the capital program, and we did. And this is it. So if you're talking preservation and you really want to understand it, you've got to talk about it in the terms of P1, P2, and P3. And you hear a lot in these meetings that we come to about P1 and P2. And Paula Hammond earlier, she pointed out, people need to understand, she said, she just used the term bridge. In a DOT standpoint, that's P2, about the consequences of basically what she was articulating is the consequences of the P2 program not being appropriately funded. P1 is the program that Dave Gent was talking about earlier with the asphalt projects, those 40-some asphalt projects. But don't forget about P3. P3 is safety rest areas, the drainage systems, slopes, electrical systems, basic safety, the way stations. So understanding these programs is somewhat important when you're talking about how are we going to gain understanding by the right people to affect the decisions to understand where we actually stand. And now part of that programming structure that came in 92 is the I program. I1, I2, I3, I4. And sometimes in these meetings, you're going to see as I go through this presentation, it's almost like we're pitting ourselves against ourselves. Because make no mistake about it, the majority of people love the I1 program. They love the I3 program. They love the I4 program. And they will totally recognize the need for the the I2 program. Stop laughing at me, Brian. The I2 program, because that is what people are saying is our way to possibly start to deal with those 818 deaths. But there's no money in the I2 program. We've siphoned it off. Guess why we created this programming structure in 1992? Because we didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough money. And so we thought, well, we need to have a better discretionary way to decide where to spend our money. So we'll make it very clear that if we're going to do safety, we're not going to do it under a paving project. We're going to call it I2. And if we're going to do a paving project, we're going to know it's a paving project. We're going to call it P1. So we created this very, very smart system. But guess what? Over time, they've all become so underfunded that it's that chart that we were talking about earlier. And I'm going to show it again here in a minute. But here's another way to look at it. So, and I think this was referenced earlier. To do preservation correctly, you want to stay in that green belt at the top, the lowest life cycle zone, whether it's P1, P2, or P3. You want to fix things before they're completely broken. You change the oil in your car before your engine seizes up. You want to be in the lowest life cycle cost. Here is where the dollars in those three programs, if you look back multiple bienniums, have how far short they have fallen below being able to fund them at the lowest life cycle cost. Specifically to pavement. And again, this was talked about a lot. So now this is just lane miles paved. Look at this. So I was like, I had a little note here. I got to make sure I tell them that the best way to have a program is to have a consistent spending level. But yet I didn't have to do it, right? You heard it from other people more eloquent than me earlier today. Look at this. Is there anything consistent about this? How can our asphalt industry, the partners that we absolutely have to rely on, deal with a program that swings this wildly on how many lane miles that we're allowed to pave in any 1 year? And again, you've heard from, it's not like there's purse strings that they just don't want to open up. There's no money in the purse. They have to constantly make these decisions between all these things we love. But this just can articulate kind of the drop and the amount of lane miles that we've been able, that how we've kind of paved. Look, we were also optimistic around 2017. You look at where we were getting, but then look at 2021. You know, so this is no way to run an efficient program. From you talk to anyone, again, whether it's from the industry that's out there or those of us that have to have workforce to put these contracts together, to have a program that swings this wildly is very difficult to manage correctly. Just some more budget numbers. You see me so many, I won't dwell on them. Again, I'll just punch home this fact here too. With all that and the money that's going in, great, really appreciate the 100 million and the 80 and the 80. But basically, if you look at all of our roadways, we're only getting to about half of them, 50% of our lane miles, whether it's miles that are addressed by as concrete, chip seals, or asphalt. You roll that all up, they're past due on where they need to be. You've seen these charts earlier, so I won't dwell on them. Again, they must mean something if they get in everyone's presentation though. So let's go back to this chart, because I want to make a point that's very, very relevant to what I was really wanting everyone to hear today. That top line, highways, that $1 billion, that is maintenance and operations and preservation. Maintenance and operations did not get its own line. It is built into that 1 billion. But when people throw money towards that 1.51 billion, it's not making its way into M&O, not at any substantial amount. Like I showed you in the chart before, just 3 or 4 specific things they're going behind on what they're able to supply and level of service, but yet they can't show it because they have to have their budget stay in the black. It is buried in this chart, but it is extremely important. And I just threw this in here because, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, right? The complexity of what we're doing, the dollars that we need. We've talked about this, man. We need preservation money. There is a need for the money into the fixed passage program. There's this desire and need for these mega and improvement programs. So the capital budget size and need, here it is. It's huge. We can't say that people aren't choosing to invest in transportation. We thought that it was a huge program when we called this the Mount Rainier chart in the 11-13 biennium when it was 3.6 billion. We've increased that by over $3 billion of money that we're putting in. And here's all these names. And I hear, well, you're throwing all this money in there, but you're not putting it in the right spot. And these names are so small you can't see them. So I wanted to pull some of these out so you could actually see them. The names that make this up that we want to villainize. We can't. Snoqualmie Pass East, widening Easton. I guarantee you that that's a needed project and has a ton of support. It has wildlife connectivity. It has our whole east-west movement of freight. I could go on and on. I-5 in the JLB corridor improvements. Anyone want to believe those aren't needed? There are people that specifically are part of good roads because they want attention given to the needs on 405. So you want to make a case, let's take the money from there. Something that's near and dear to my heart because I have spent this year in Spokane is this little thing called the North Spokane Corridor that they've been trying to work on for 30 years that is funded in this. That was an attempt to have money shifted away from that, and people came from all walks of life to say, you must not use that as your funding source. Anyone want to tackle not doing the rest of the 520 corridor? You just heard some of our key elected officials talk about the Portage Bay and why that needed to take place. Oh, does anyone want to challenge the need for Gateway? So when we throw some darts at this, we got to be careful because these are all things that we're as WSDOT are asked to deliver by the legislature. These are all things that I can guarantee you we're hearing when we work in the planning world and with jurisdictions that they want, and we're doing our best to deliver them. And anytime there is an idea to not do them, we hear again how important they are to the system. Moving ahead, Washington. I always get mixed feelings on how people actually feel about that. What is this thing all about? Well, here's a bunch of stuff that the Moving Ahead Washington is funding. This is all good stuff. But in these big things, someone's, there's some darts to get thrown at them. So I broke it down some more. There are things in here that no one will want to lose. Look at this third bullet. This is IBR. This is the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, $1 billion. What happens when that goes away? There is $750 million in Moving Ahead Washington for maintenance and operations. Is it even beginning to keep up with where they need to be to maintain the same level of service? No, it is not. But is it preventing them from falling even further behind? Yes, it is. Anyone that drives SR18, you want to say that that's not a project that needs funding? So again, you can go down this list and you can find believing that MA should be a funding source for some other need that we believe needs attention. It's like you're taking out of one side, one bank account or one need, and you're putting it in the other side. You're taking away money to fix your roof, to fix your car. It's the need, the desire is overwhelming. Make no mistake about it, this fish program, we were asked to do it by the legislature. This is what something looks like on the left that caused this injunction to happen, this legal direction to happen. And this is what it should look like. And this is what the work is doing. It is amazing work. And there are hundreds of contracts that are underway. And whatever your beliefs are on this, there is a legal direction to do it. The legislature is accepting that legal responsibility. Then they give the money to WSDOT, and they say, we expect you to go do this work, and we are doing it, and it is being done in amazing fashion. And believe me, there are hundreds of people, both on the industry side and my side, when they hear rocks thrown at the fish program, it's a personal insult because they're putting their hearts and souls into this, and it is good work. But let's talk about that fish program, because oh my gosh, and you heard about it a little bit earlier. Here was the program size, money that was spent. This is what many people thought would be required at one time. This is what was able to be put in this session. But these lines here is what is anticipated at this point in time as a need to complete, not all of the injunction, just the injunction to get to 90%. It's another $3 to $4 billion is what this adds up to. Some felt like the injunction was so critical that the legislature would have no choice but to give more money to make these blue lines a reality. But you heard again, that just isn't how it works. There's no money. Where's this supposed to come from? So this is all that they were able to give, which was enough to keep this program going. But they're walking into future sessions, whoever's sitting in those seats, staring headlong into these numbers. And this is what it will take to stay even close to being in compliance with what they're legally being required to do, and they then will ask us to do as part of that legal requirement. Okay, shout out to WSDOT Workforce. Again, this is that chart of our work, and this is that unprecedented. This is our FTEs, our full-time equivalents. Those are our bodies, essentially, that are working. To do this monumental effort, we had this type of a peak. We had to come down off of that, which was not a lot of fun. We've seen this other peak moving ahead. We didn't like how this was difficult to come back down. So we really engaged with more of our industry, with the consultant side, and we're using consultants along with our own workforce, and we're gearing up our workforce to meet this need, and they're doing incredible stuff to make that need. But make no mistake about it, it is challenging to have the right workforce. Where is this work? Am I working on Fish Passage? Or am I working on Gateway? Or am I working on Portage Bay? What am I even, who do I hire? Where do I put them? Know that we are still hiring. Know that we are still facing unprecedented amount of people retiring. I think Brian, I picked on you a lot today. Brian was even trying to entice me into retiring earlier today. There's just a lot of people that are in that retirement zone, more than you would typically have. So what is the size of our workforce? We're constantly wrestling with that. You've seen that chart. Do we go up? Do we go down? Do we stay stable? Everyone wants these few people that have decided to take this on for a career. There is just a challenging labor market, whether it's on the trade side or the engineering side or the planning side. I find myself trying to outbid planners going to the city. It's funny because I need the planners in the city as well as I need them here. So there's a challenging labor market like there's never been. And again, I hope everyone knows that there should be a shout out to all these people, whether they're in the industry, in the trades, or in WSDOT, they're all working their tails off at a level that no one has ever done before. And we're constantly right on the verge of worrying about burnout. And then there's this bullet. If you're working out on the road, again, whether you are on the industry side, if you're one of my maintenance and operations employees, if you're an inspector on a capital program, you're at a risk out there like you have never been before. It is an unprecedented level of risk. So those 6 people, I had the privilege of being able to sit down and speak to them at the Workers' Memorial last week. They all told me what it was like to tell their significant others what had just happened to them. They all answered their phones to do a nighttime call out. And then within a couple hours, their significant others got a call, your loved one's in the hospital. So go back to focus on this. 818 deaths out there. Dwell on this number. It is a number that means putting money into safe systems approach is needed. It is a number meaning that everything Billy and all of you are doing and the industry is doing on work zone safety is important. But more than anything, it is a number that tells us something has changed in the risk profile. You don't go from the mid 500s to 818 without a major change in the risk profile. So dwell on that one. I'm going to summarize here. Safety. It's the safety of our workers. It's the safety of the users of the facility. It is everywhere. It's 818 deaths. It's workers being hit within 90 seconds. It's 3 work zone hits in one morning. Maintenance and operations. Hopefully I've been able to frame in some understanding. It is just as important as everything else, and somehow it's getting lost in the conversation. It can't get lost. They've been cut so much now. They are our first responders. They are heroes. It is getting lost. We must start dwelling on that money that is needed for maintenance and operations to be at the level of service that they need to be at. Fish barrier removal. It is being good stewards of this planet. It is being good stewards of the waters of Washington. But it doesn't matter what I think about that. It's a court mandated requirement. It's coming from the legislature for this department to do it. We will put our skills and talents, and the industry will back us up with outstanding work contracts to make this stuff happen. They're not only doing incredibly design bid build, they're doing incredible design build work in this area. They're setting the standard for fish removal across the entire nation. Preservation, when we talk about this number, please make sure in your sub mind you're knowing it's P1, P2, and P3, and it's not just asphalt. It's all of these things. It's no good if my ITS boards don't work. It's no good if there's no reflectivity on my guide signs. It's all of these features. The ferry system. I didn't even have time to touch on the ferry system in this presentation. But if you're in the Puget Sound area, I don't think you can go a week without being exposed to some sort of concern about the state of the ferry system. Guess what? The ferry system has been ignored financially, and I'm not throwing stones at anyone. You're forced to ignore it because there's no money. It has been ignored from the capital side and their preservation side for years and years and years and years. You can't think I'm going to fix maintenance or any of these and I'm not going to address the ferries. It just can't work. We have to have workforce. If we don't have workforce, I don't have skilled people, I don't have people that want to work here, we can't do any of this. And right now, you all and we are privileged to have an outstanding workforce, again, on the industry side and on the government side. Finish what was started. Thinking that all those projects, that big money is a funding source to move someplace else, that it's not going to work. All those projects, I hear about it every day from people. They want those projects as well. We can't take out of one pocket to put in the other pocket. We've got to finish what was going on. Emergency response is a huge emerging problem. And guess what? The last bullet. It just goes on more and more and more and more. And before I stop and take questions, if there's anyone left on here, I'd like to show one of my favorite pictures. This is part of the North Spokane corridor. It is the first completed section of it being elevated. It sits there waiting for the current contract that is underway by Cooney Construction to hook onto it in the top of the picture. And we have workforce that is busily putting together contracts that are scheduled to go to ad here very shortly, within a year, to build and connect on to this end. It is opened up miles of new corridor that makes the movement of people and goods much, much better in Spokane. And guess what we have to do with this thing? We have to operate it. Guess how much money the legislature and all of the challenges that they have were able to give us to operate and maintain this? Basically, nothing. So with that, I'll stop here for a second and see if I spurred on any questions, if anyone is left there.
Thanks, Todd. I know we're running a little bit behind. Todd's email is right there too. And if you don't mind, Todd, put your email in the chat. The full presentation will be up on our website. And if you reach out to Noel or myself, I'm sure we can shoot you over a copy too as well. But Will does have one question. So go ahead, Will.
I just want to frame this question for you, Todd. Our conversation about preservation and maintenance as a Good Roads Association started with your predecessor, Kevin Dayton, telling us that we have infrastructure that's crumbling under our feet now. That's a direct quote, and you were in the room when he made it. How much impact has there been on your resiliency from this underfunding of preservation and maintenance for 20 years or more?
Trying to get a quote from me, aren't you, Will? I don't know how you put a measurement to it, Will. It's you've seen it there. There's contracts that are happening. Look at that picture I showed you there on I-82. That was not resilient feature. The ability to go in and work on something that is as non-exciting as culverts alone is imperative to have resiliency within our system. And it is something that is just simply not on the radar for being able to be funded. It is not something that I think anyone has been able to grapple on to have a measurement, or maybe we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. We're just at a point in time where investment and understanding of the need for maintenance and operation funding and how that works in conjunction with preservation funding, the shortfalls where we're at in a safety program, and the need for the projects like capacity and economic development for the economy and demand of the people are all just hitting one another in a priority sense. And the legislature has not had the ability to give us the money to work on all of these.
Great.
There you go.
I just want to say that we don't have time for more questions, but I really want to thank you for taking the job, because your presentation was that of a great principal engineer.
Thanks, Will. And again, sorry that we're short of time. If you do have questions specifically, really, if it's about maintenance and operations, make sure you hunt me down somehow, or because it's imperative that all of you understand the striking difference between maintenance and operations and preservation. And when we say maintenance and preservation, we don't mean to be linking those two together. It's just a quick phrase to say both. But unfortunately, many times what people hear is just preservation, and the need for funding in maintenance and operations of our system. And that workforce, those 1,500 people, is getting lost in the conversation.
Great. Thanks again, Todd. And don't hesitate to use myself, Noel, or anybody here at the Good Roads as a resource, right, for even some of the RAs in your region if you have questions, or to reach out to Todd too as well. So